I love to see it. MAGA world and right-wing media have gone into panic mode following damning testimony that was given by former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows' aide, a woman by the name of Cassidy Hutchinson. This was testimony that she gave during the January 6th hearings, and her testimony was so compelling that you have one pro-Trump right-winger after the next trying to essentially dismiss her, write her off as someone who is not credible, someone who wasn't actually privy to the kinds of conversations that she testified about. And I want to start off with some of the compelling testimony that MAGA world is so upset about. So for instance, some of the most compelling testimony was when Cassidy Hutchinson described the moment when Trump had lunged at the Secret Service agent who refused to drive him over to the Capitol as the riots were about to take place. Let's watch.
Tony described him as being irate. The president said something to the effect of, "I'm the effing president, take me up to the Capitol now." To which Bobby responded, "Sir, we have to go back to the West Wing." The president reached up towards the front of the vehicle to grab at the steering wheel. Mr. Engel grabbed his arm, said, "Sir, you need to take your hand off the steering wheel. We're going back to the West Wing. We're not going to the Capitol." Mr. Trump then used his free hand to lunge towards Bobby Engel. And when Mr. Renato had recounted this story to me, he had motioned towards his clavicles.
Now, I want to be clear about something. When I say that it's some of the most compelling testimony she gave, what I specifically mean is she paints a picture of who Trump is. Just this unhinged person who's willing to engage in violence in order to get what he wants. But when you look at the grand scheme of things and what really matters in terms of Trump's criminality, or alleged criminality, that's not the most important part of her testimony. The most important part of the testimony is when she makes it abundantly clear that Donald Trump was fully aware that his supporters were heavily armed. He was fully aware that his supporters were marching to the Capitol while chanting Mike Pence. And when Trump was specifically asked to do something about it, he refused to do so. In fact, he argued that maybe Pence deserves it because he refused to overturn the election. Now, Trump supporters thought that they caught Cassidy Hutchinson in a lie when she gave that testimony about how he had allegedly lunged toward a Secret Service agent who told him, "No, we're not gonna drive you over to the Capitol." So the supporters say the vehicle that he was allegedly in, it's nicknamed the Beast, it often transports the president, is so heavily fortified that there's no way that Trump could physically lunge at a Secret Service member in the front of the car. Well, Trump said that it wouldn't have been possible for him to do such a thing as well. And Kellyanne Conway echoed that same talking point. Let's watch.
Look, I've been in the Beast many times. I've been in those SUVs countless times. I would find it very difficult to lunge into the front and be able to do that, particularly in the Beast. It's not developed that way. The president has denied this. He's denied this publicly. He's denied this privately to many people today.
So again, let me repeat, this is not the most important part of her testimony. And when I say her testimony, I mean Hutchinson's testimony. But it is being used as a way to essentially dismantle her as someone who is not credible, as someone who's not to be trusted. And it turns out that while all of these Trump cronies and lapdogs think like, got him, caught her in a lie, he was riding in the Beast, turns out that's not necessarily the case. So Carol Leonig, who is a reporter for the Washington Post, wrote a book about the Secret Service, and she actually quickly debunked this talking point, the so-called smoking gun. So let's hear what she had to say.
It would be very difficult in what is really called the Beast, the limousine, the old Cadillac. It would be very difficult over the communications equipment, I'm informed by people who ride in that vehicle rather regularly, for the president to have lunged over it towards his detail leader. But, sorry, Rachel, there's a big but, which is this wasn't the Beast. The president was riding on January 6th in what is called the suburban. This is one where it would have been possible, a lot more easy for the president to lunge forward towards the right front seat from the back.
He wasn't in the Beast, ladies and gentlemen. He was in a suburban. But in the grand scheme of things, as juicy as that part of the testimony was, again, for the purposes of investigating Donald Trump's role, for the purposes of possibly filing charges against Trump, that part of her testimony doesn't really matter that much anyway. But again, the right wing, I think, is using it to kind of present her as someone that's not worth trusting. And then at the same time, it's a distraction from her other testimony, which even right-wing pundits, even people like Brett Baier over at Fox News, even people like Mick Mulvaney, who was part of Trump's administration, argued was super persuasive, super compelling, and they do not think that she was lying about it. So let's go to their next tactic, right? Because they're trying to play around with this whole car situation. They're trying to make her seem like she's not to be trusted, not a credible person. And then what else are they doing? Well, they're trying to pretend like her role as a top aide for Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, wasn't really that big of a role, and she wasn't really around much, and she wasn't really privy to the conversation she claims to know so much about. So let's go to Trump advisor and garbage person, Jason Miller, making that point.
You knew Cassidy Hutchinson. What kind of a, I've met her a few times, but I didn't really have much contact. What kind of person is she?
She's an extremely junior, low-level aide. I don't think I ever had a conversation with her that I can at least recall of any substance or depth. But to Molly's point, this is a Rorschach test for your sanity. Yes. If you heard this story and you thought, man, I believe every word of this, I'm going to go online and say something about it energetically, something is wrong with you.
So that was Stephen Miller. I'm sorry, I think I accidentally misspoke and said Jason Miller, my bad, Stephen Miller. So yeah, so you can see there, he's just trying to dismiss her as like, I haven't even had any substantive conversations with her. Hey, Jason, what would a substantive conversation sound like with a guy like you? I mean, I would argue that the only thing that this guy would find substantive, any conversation would have to be with like a neo-Nazi or a member of the KKK. Any other conversation, no substantive conversation. It's just not substantive. She's not a substantive person. She's a woman after all, right? On Truth Social, Trump also claimed that he hardly knew her, called her a third-rate social climber, and went on to criticize her handwriting. That is what he has been reduced to. How pathetic is that? Again, the theory that Hutchinson was a nobody was quickly debunked, so let me get to that. During the first impeachment trial, Hutchinson grew close to Mark Meadows as a legislative affairs staffer in the White House, former advisors said. This is according to the Washington Post. Once he was named chief of staff in March of 2020, he immediately elevated her. And she eventually became his principal assistant. She was given an office next to his, which in turn put her a few doors away from the Oval Office. The other thing I want to just note is the fact that when Trump, during his speech at that rally prior to the riots, said that he was going to march to the Capitol with the rioters, the first person that Kevin McCarthy called was Cassidy Hutchinson. He called Cassidy Hutchinson and was like, hey, you guys promised that no, he's not marching over to the Capitol, and no one's marching over to the Capitol. What's going on? And she had to clarify what was going on, that there was an agreement that Trump would not be going to the Capitol. Why would Kevin McCarthy immediately call Cassidy Hutchinson and ask for clarity if she was just some low-level social climber? Makes no sense. In Trump's White House, Hutchinson had extraordinary access, and in the eyes of many White House staffers, she had inordinate power. Some derisively called her Chief Cassidy, and even House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's staff asked White House aides why she was in on legislative meetings. She was everywhere. Look, she seemed like an ambitious woman. She wanted to be at those meetings, and apparently high-level officials in the Trump administration, including Trump himself, were warned about her. So here's Brendan Buck. Okay, he's a former staffer on the Hill. He says, I don't know Cassidy Hutchinson, and I can't speak to how things worked at the White House. But when Meadows was on the Hill, he always insisted that she be in every meeting he had, no matter how small. It was odd then and doesn't seem to be working out for him now. Sorry, Meadows. Look, I love that he allowed her in all the meetings because we now have some pretty damning evidence against Donald Trump, against Mark Meadows. The right has also devolved into labeling Cassidy Amber Heard 2.0, which, listen, I watched nearly every minute of the Amber Heard Johnny Depp trial. If that's all they've got, they're in a lot of trouble. I don't think anyone can watch the testimony that she gave and even compare it to Amber Heard's presentation or performance during the trial that she was in. Cassidy Hutchinson was clear, she was prepared, she came with receipts, and you see the right wingers just absolutely freaking out about it. Now back to the car issue, right? The idea that Trump had lunged over at the Secret Service. There's one other detail that I think is worth sharing, which is the fact that according to Carol Leonig, the person we heard from a little earlier, sources tell me Secret Service agents dispute that Donald Trump assaulted any agent or tried to grab the steering wheel on January 6th. They agree Trump was furious about not being able to go to the Capitol with his supporters. They offered to testify under oath, which is great. If they want to clarify that, if they want to share their side of the story, sure, go ahead and do it. But I would also caution against two things. Number one, letting this part of her testimony suck up all the energy because again, it's not the most important part of her testimony. And number two, yesterday during the hearing, Liz Cheney closed by mentioning that some of the witnesses were dealing with intimidation tactics. There was some witness tampering going on. And so here's the Secret Service spokesperson. Oh, by the way, so I want to actually go to the last graphic here because this is what she was alluding to. So Liz Cheney remarked that witnesses had been tampered with. She gave two examples of how witnesses described their interactions with Trump, with the Trump campaign or administration officials. So for those of you who might have difficulty reading that, it says, what they said to me is, as long as I continue to be a team player, they know that I'm on the team. I'm doing the right thing. I'm protecting who I need to protect. I'll continue to stay in good graces in Trump world. And they have reminded me a couple of times that Trump does read transcripts. And just to keep that in mind as I proceeded through my depositions and interviews with the committee. So that was one person who had told the House Select Committee that he or she, they didn't identify the person, but that he or she was being intimidated. A person also, this is another example, a person let me know, you have your deposition tomorrow. He wants me to let you know he's thinking about you. He knows you're loyal and you're going to do the right thing when you go in for your deposition. So my question is, these Secret Service agents who want to testify and say, no, Trump was very upset that we refused to drive him to the Capitol, but he didn't lunge at us. Have they been tampered with? Have they been intimidated? Like, I'd like to know more details about that. But either way, at the end of the day, her testimony about Trump lunging at them, not that important. His testimony regarding wanting to essentially, her testimony about him wanting to allow heavily armed supporters to like hang Mike Pence, it's a lot more damning. A lot of her testimony was incredibly important to this investigation. We'll see if Merrick Garland does anything about it. But I think watching the desperation from people close to Trump in response to her testimony is both amusing and tells you a lot about what's really going on, what really went on, and how many people within the administration knew about what was about to transpire on January 6th.